Roy Williams is a marketing man. His clients want to buy whatever advertising sells the most product.
It's Rick Dees in the morning. All communication should be poetic. Bring him in, please. Roy Williams!
Essential to any company is the ability to get your message out. My guest says, don't give up hope. Joining me now is Roy Williams.
Yes, so how do you speak in poetry to people and get them to do things you want them to do?
Here to talk about the advantages of radio advertising is the author of a new book called The Wizard of Ads.
Joining me is Roy Williams. Today we're talking about his book, Secret Formulas of the Wizard of Ads. This is one of the most important books that anybody can read.
What makes people do the things they do? More importantly, how can we get people to do what we want them to do? With another part of the answer to that question, here's the Wizard of Ads, Roy H. Williams.
We're going to spend a few minutes talking about how to calculate an ad budget. Now, there are a lot of different organizations that teach how to calculate an ad budget. Most of them teach you'll spend 5 to 6% of your gross revenues on advertising and 5 to 6% on rent. Now, unfortunately, that is a very dangerous formula because it will very often result in underperformance when somebody has a very low cost of occupancy. They spend very little on rent because they're in the middle of an industrial park with no drive-by traffic. Those people are seriously underspending when they only spend 5 or 6% on advertising. You see, advertising and rent, advertising and the building payment, advertising and whatever it costs you to occupy where you are, those two things combined create exposure. Now, your total cost of exposure is what you should calculate, not worry about what percentage is devoted to occupancy and what percentage is devoted to advertising. Now, the correct formula will allow you to compensate with less advertising for a very high cost of occupancy. It will allow you to compensate for a low cost of occupancy with deeper, wider, broader, heavier advertising. Now, an extremely high cost of occupancy for a really landmark location is very often the highest and best use of the exposure budget. Why? Because people see you when they're not looking for you. However, very few landmark locations are available. Almost never. Usually you're going to have to settle for something less than intrusive visibility. And you're going to have to compensate for it with increased advertising. Now, businesses who save money by investing in weak locations always have to advertise much more heavily. 5 to 6% will usually not do it. And there's no one-size-fits-all formula for calculating all ad budgets, but there is a very concise formula for retail businesses. And it's very easily adapted to fit other business categories as well. It goes like this. Step 1, budget 10% to 12% of total projected sales for exposure. It's called total cost of exposure. 10% to 12%. We're going to figure it both ways. We're going to figure a 10% budget. We're going to figure a 12% budget. Then we're going to adjust that budget. Step 2, we're going to adjust it by multiplying those dollars times the percentage markup that the business owner enjoys. Not profit margin. There's a difference which I will explain in a little bit. Margin is one way of looking at profit. Markup is another way of looking at the same profit. More details in a moment. But you multiply the budget times the markup. Then, it's very simple. You simply deduct the cost of occupancy. You subtract the rent. And the balance is the ad budget. Now, we're going to take a look at what this actually looks like. This store has projected sales of $1 million. Notice I didn't say historic sales, not last year's sales of $1 million, because we don't want to keep doing what we've done before. If we spend like $1 million store, we're very likely to do $1 million. If we want to do $1.5 million, let's spend like a store that's doing $1.5 million. Let's spend ad dollars like the company we want to be. Now, if we're projecting sales of $1 million, you multiply it times 10%, you have a budget for total cost of exposure of $100,000. Now, we're going to assume that this particular company is falling short of Keystone. Keystone is a slang term for 100% markup. Bought it for $1, sold it for $2. 100% markup. Keystone. This guy's falling short of Keystone. 8 points short. He only has a 92% markup on average. Now, we multiply $100,000 times 92% to come up with an adjusted budget for total cost of exposure of $92,000. Now, his rent. How much is your rent? $3,000 a month. Bang. $36,000 a year is deducted from the cost of occupancy budget. He now has an ad budget of $56,000. That's the 10% budget. When we change the figures to reflect the 12% budget, it becomes $120,000 times 92% is $110,400. Minus the rent of $36,000, $74,400. This business is projecting $1 million. They have a $36,000 per year cost of occupancy. Guess what? Somewhere between $56,000 and $74,400 is the correct window of investment for this business to make in advertising. You can like it, lump it, take it down the road and dump it. That's the truth. Now, let's change a couple of variables. Let's first change the markup to only 61%. This retailer is a low-cost provider. They figure to make a small amount of money and make up for it with volume. Tricky to advertise for these people. Here's why. They have to do a lot of business to justify a very small advertising investment. They need to see a lot of customers to justify a little bit of ads. They better hope for a very high personal experience factor. We'll talk more about that later. Now, if 61% is the markup, look how that changes the adjusted budget for total cost of exposure. We now have $73,200, from which we deduct $36,000. We're at $37,200. And that's the 12% budget. Wait a minute. We had $74,400 a minute ago. Same $1 million business. Same $36,000 a year rent. Wait a minute. We had twice as much money when we had a 92% markup. Now with only a 61% markup, we have half as much to spend in advertising. When you're in the advertising business, people who are good enough at what they do to make a good profit at it, those are the people you want to work with because they have the ability to advertise aggressively. Low margin, low cost providers, it's very tricky. Now let's look at another example. This person is only 17 points over Keystone. Not unusual to be 17 points over Keystone. A lot of industries do that. Good, sharp operators provide such a tremendous customer experience and service after the sale that they can actually get $2.17 for something they only paid $1 for. Now, what does that do? Whenever we adjust the $120,000 budget for total cost of exposure times the markup of 117%, we wind up with $140,400 from which we deduct the rent, and now all of a sudden instead of $37,000, we have $104,000, $104,400 for advertising. Same $1 million business, same $36,000 rent. Are you beginning to understand how this formula reconciles markup with volume, with rent, all the things relative to finding the right number for the business? Now, step 1, 10 to 12% of projected sales for total cost of exposure. Step 2, multiply by the store's average markup above cost of goods sold. Step 3, deduct the cost of occupancy, and the balance is the ad budget. Ta-da! It's just that simple. An item is bought for $1 and is sold for $1.50. The gross profit is 50 cents. The markup on that sale is 50%, because markup is gross profit expressed as a percentage of the seller's cost. I'm making the sale what the item costs me, the markup expressed as a percentage of cost. The same margin, the same profit rather, expressed as a profit margin is only 33%, because profit margin is the gross profit expressed as a percentage of the selling price. Now the 50 cents relative to the $1.50 selling price is only 33%. The 50 cents expressed as a percentage of my cost, which is $1, is 50%. So the 50% markup, 33% margin. The formula I gave you for calculating the ad budget is based upon markup. Make sure that your retailer is giving you markup, not margin percentages. The item is bought for $1, sold for $2. The gross profit is $1. The markup on that sale is 100%. The margin is 50%. Why? Sold it for $2. $1 of it was profit. What was the percentage? 50% of the sales price was profit. What happens is you buy it for $1, you sell it for $3. You make a $2 profit on a $3 sale. Well, that's a 200% markup, but it's only a 66% profit margin. Do you understand? Bought it for $1, added 200%, sold it for $3. The profit expressed as a percentage of cost is markup. The profit expressed as a percentage of the sales price is margin. A 200% markup is a 66% margin. Can you see what a disaster it would be to have somebody with a 200% markup, you said, so how much do you make on a sale? And he says 66%, and you put 66% in the formula when you should have put 200? Make sure that your advertiser is giving you markup percentages.